Hey guys, it's Pandas. I've got a very special video for you folks today. We're going to be talking about the impulse effect in Battlefield 4. I'll be explaining what exactly it is, as well as showing you how you can counter it. So what exactly is the impulse effect? Well, it's really a combination of what's referred to in the game files as the impact impulse, blast impulse, and shockwave impulse, reacting with the material meshes of whatever vehicle you are flying or operating, and how the physics engine responds to that. So in other words, it's basically a representation of the force that a vehicle would experience when it gets struck by an explosive. In this first clip, we have the Kasatka tilted to the right. The missiles are hitting the bottom left corner, and the helicopter flips and blows up.
Sploosh.
Now we have the exact opposite. We're using the bottom right side for the missiles, and we're tilted to the left. We get the same result, and the helicopter blows up. Now we're pointing the same direction, but we're tilting right this time. And as you can see, the helicopter actually gets pushed, but it's perfectly upright. It's a different example now, same scenario. And as you can see, it's controllable. It's not being flipped upside down anymore. We do the exact opposite side now, and we get a similar result. I've drawn a diagram to help you guys process what's happening. In this model, we've got the helicopter pointed forwards, and there's a missile that was launched from the ground that's going to strike it on the right side. We've got an arbitrary angle of 20 degrees here, but notice that we've labeled the X and Y components of the impulse forces, and also made note of the location of impact. Now all these are going to factor in to when we calculate the rotational speed, which is noted by the omega symbol in the upper right. That rotational speed is what's causing many helicopters to flip on their sides and upside down. Depending on the initial altitude and offset of the helicopter, you might not have enough time to react or correct yourself if you get hit by one or successive missile hits. Knowing this, the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we minimize or eliminate the rotational movements of helicopters when they get hit by missiles? And the solution is to focus more on translational movements, the sort of sliding motions in one direction without getting rotated. In the interest of time, I'll just say that the best way to do this in my experience is to minimize either the impulse force in the X direction or the Y direction, depending on which side we're using. In this example, we're getting hit from the right side, so I would minimize the Y component of the impulse force. And the way I do that is by minimizing the angle offset of the incoming missile compared to the plane of the helicopter. The plane would be represented by the horizontal black line here, and the incoming missile, as you can see, is noted by that red arrow pointing towards the location of impact. So that degree measurement, if you can get it as close to 0 as possible, that's going to result in a much larger, 99% of the force being in the X direction. Now this is all relative, so if your helicopter is tilted in midair, just keep track of where the coordinates are, and because it all depends on what's happening in the air, not on what's on the ground. But anyways, back on track here. If you can minimize that degree measurement, what will happen is that your helicopter is just going to be pushed to the side, but it won't be rotated. And since it won't be rotated, that means that you're not going to get flipped over. So here are some examples of where I've done that. Here we're using the Z9 positioned above the AA, and we're using the floor to absorb the missile impact. It's not really shaken that much, and that's because of the angle that the missile hit it at. It's very close to being perpendicular. Flying away, we do the same thing. We compensate for our position, and we're back in action again. Using the left side, notice how it kind of strikes that top of the chopper, and there is some rotational displacement, about 30-40 degrees. Same thing happens on the other side. But because of our initial position and orientation, we were not shifted into a unrecoverable state where the chopper just fall down and crash. We were able to recover and keep fighting. Up until now, we've mostly talked about situations where there's only one missile coming at you. But in a real match, you often have to deal with multiple missiles, which can make your life a lot harder if you don't adjust properly. This is because those successive missiles have impulse effects of their own that need to be countered, and the angle that they hit you at, that offset, will not be ideal because of the previous missiles. So there's really two ways to survive through this. The first is to plant the chopper flat on the ground where it can't be flipped. But if you can't do that, the second option is to overcompensate and make it so that your initial orientation will absorb all of the impulse effects of those successive missile hits.
There we go.
The last thing that I want to talk about is the center of mass and the pilot seats. Now, all three transport helicopters in the game have center of masses that are roughly in the center of the chopper, or somewhere in the passenger compartment. This is because of the extra mass that's in the tail section that brings it back a little bit. It's not in the nose. But all the locking weapons in the game actually track the pilot seats of the helicopters, not the center of mass. So if you're flying in the Casca, that'll be the cockpit right seat. If you're flying the Venom or the Haitoon, it'll be in the cockpit left seat. And this has implications for how you counter missiles. Let's suppose that there's a missile coming from the right, just like this diagram. Depending on which seat the pilot seat is located in, the missile will actually hit to different points of the helicopter. And notice that the distance from the pilot seat with the point of impact differs depending on which side you are on. It is much easier to gauge the angles of the incoming missiles when that distance is minimized. Therefore, the optimal side for absorbing missile impacts is often going to be the side that has the pilot seat. Just make sure your designated gunner also knows this so he's on the right side. You can apply the same lessons that I talked about in this video with the other types of helicopters, but keep in mind that the execution is going to be a little bit different because of the different positioning of the pilot seats in the center of mass. Thanks again for watching this video, and we'll see you guys next time.